Everybody, this is On coming to you with this month's video. And this month, I am taking a look at this whole emotional states that people are going through. I've had a lot of people saying, I've just had this huge amount of emotions coming through me, and I'm not really sure what that's about. I'm not really sure, why or all of a sudden what's going on here, what's this about? And of course, there's always tons of things that play into it. But before I get going too much further into this topic, what I want to do is to take a moment and say, I'm the author of this book, The Code Journey. And I'm currently working on the 2026 edition, but the 2025 is available. Every year I put out a new edition of this book. You can see it's a pretty thick book there to do, but it is a personal journey book, and it is a day-by-day kind of guide. I go over the influences of the year and what the influences and currents are on a month-to-month basis, and then what they are on a day-to-day basis. So it's really handy to have that foresight to work with and to understand some of these spaces, because if we don't understand the currents, it's going to be one of those things that's going to catch us off guard. And then we'll go into like these emotional states and just kind of all of a sudden be like, man, I'm overwhelmed with these emotions. What's going on? And what is this about? And so with this book, it's really great and helpful to, have that foresight to say, oh, okay, there's certain things that are happening. They may trigger emotions for me. And then be able to face that aware and alert. It's no different than saying, okay, I know a storm's going to come in, so maybe I need to have some extra water on supply or whatever the case is to deal with that storm. Or I'm going to have company over, and so I want to make sure I have certain things here that will make them comfortable, things like that. So it's the same kind of concept in that. But yeah, I really wanted to take a look at this because anytime I get more than, one or two people that say that they have a certain thing going on, I want to address that. I want to take a look at that, because it's like, okay, what is this connected to? What is happening here? And, in this aspect, what we have, the concept of the basic thing that's happening for people is they're saying, I've got all these emotional aspects going on. I just suddenly have had all of these emotions flowing through me. I don't know what it's about. Now, when we get emotional, there's a lot of things that could be tied to that. I mean, we could be tied to trauma in this. We could be tied to past incidents that are happening and somebody in the present is triggering it. For younger women, it can be hormonal things that are going on, shifts in the hormones. And we know that can shift with food, let alone any medications that somebody might be on. Of course, there's the moon cycles, there's the spikes in the energy currents, and a lot of the emotional stuffs were coming up semi close to a spike, but not really. It's kind of been in this in-between space. And so I started looking at the influences for April, and I'm like, well, what's going on? Because that's always my first question. What's going on with the energy, and how does that tie in with what people are feeling and what they're experiencing in here? So, if you have anything going on like this and you want to share it, put a comment put a note in the comments section. I am staying more up on those these days, so I'm able to actually go in and check things a little bit better in case I don't get the notices on them like I wasn't for a while. But these emotional aspects right now, what I'm seeing when I look at how they connect in with the codes, is an aspect that they're really rooting into what seems to be deceit. Deceit, particularly from teachers, from leaders, and not just anyone, but particularly deceit from spiritual leaders, religious leaders, faith leaders, healers, people in the spiritual movement. And I think that this is a very interesting piece that we're seeing, because this is the energy that's present in April. And of course, there's certain component, a lot of that energy has also been present in March, where we've talked about these, false leaders coming forward and the fake gurus and things like that, and getting more exposure onto them. But when we're looking at this from a spiritual process, I think this is probably one of the hardest things. We always expect a little bit of so-called programming or whatever coming from adult figures, right? Because they're trying to lead us down the right path along the way. And a lot of people, I think there's a lot of people out there, they don't mean to take people in deceit, um, but they themselves may not know better. They may just be following somebody else's lead um, or just following through on somebody else's program or something like that. So they just are perpetuating things and not really knowing it or not really understanding it. So one of the things that we have to look at when these emotional aspects are going on is what have I encountered lately that might not be true? And that can be a hard thing to look at, right? Because we always want to praise our spiritual teachers. We always want to put them on a pedestals. But that doesn't mean we have to agree with them on everything. I would not expect anybody following my work to agree with me 100%. I mean, I might be right most of the time, but there may be times, and depending on where somebody is on their path, they may see something differently than where I'm seeing it after coming through a lot of things in life. So there's always a variety of things, and what may look right at one point may not look right at another point for us. So what seems like truth and we can justify it as truth at one point, we realize maybe further down the line, yeah, that wasn't true at all. And I totally get that, because that again is part of the learning process. So a lot of these emotional aspects as they're coming up, I really encourage you to take a look at that and say, have I experienced any deceit? Is there stuff that's being put out that is actually spiritual programming, or that I'm being in disillusionment about? And I think that's very, very important, because we're under the illusion a lot of times that whatever is being put out in the spiritual community is automatically truth. And it's not. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who are scammers. There's a lot of people out there to pretend that they have gifts that they don't have. There are some very legitimate people out there as well. And so there comes these points where we do hit disillusionment, just like anything, just like when we're shifting out of childhood and we're moving into becoming an adult. You start to realize, oh, I'm not going to be taken care of the way I was when I was a child. I have to go out and work. I have to have a job. I'm going to have to pay bills. I'm going to have to do all of these things. And so we need to be able to face that disillusionment in the spiritual areas as well. And that is, I think, one of the toughest things, because like I said, just like a lot of people, right? We should be able to trust certain people in our life. We should be able to trust our spiritual leaders. We should be able to trust our religious people. We should be able to trust our parents. We should be able to trust a certain variety of people in our life. So when we start looking at the disillusionment in there, what this is doing is it can actually trigger up other forms of trauma as well. So if we find out something is true, if we find out something isn't as spectacular, if we find out, yeah, my power isn't tied to whatever it is, right? A gemstone, a tarot card, whatever it is for you. Um, those things can be fun. They have their place, they have their purpose. But they're not really what's making or breaking you a lot of times. Yes, everything has an energetic influence. So on another hand, I could say, well, maybe that's not the best stone for you. But that being said, at the same time, a lot of times we have to break that disillusionment. It's not all of these tools out there. It's about what's inside of us. That's where the power comes from, because that's where we start to enter into aspects of divine connection, right? That's where we start to enter into those spaces. Now, another aspect that is really triggering with the emotional energy at this time is we're seeing a lack of patience come up. So people are getting very impatient, and this impatience seems to be connected to power, or from power, positions, people in power, things like that. So there's an impatience that's going around, and I can see it, in some of the spiritual arenas in particular, where everybody's like, man, this should have happened decades ago, or centuries ago, or whatever. Or why is it taking forever for us to bring this certain consciousness forward, or why, there's a lot of things we could probably pull up, right? And as much as I love the starseed energy and the various groups out there, some of those groupings, some of the galactic groupings, and again, not all of them, are very much tied in with various psyops. And not all of them. And again, there's aspects and factions that are real and ones that aren't real. And this is the thing. So we're seeing this impatience come up. And when this impatience and things are not happening as we want them, when we want them, our emotions get triggered as well. So it starts to build up. And what's interesting is a lot of this stuff is happening beneath the surface. So that's where it's been, I think, more challenging for people to identify some of their emotional aspects that have been coming forward or rising up in them lately, because it hasn't been as obvious where those emotions are coming from, because they may be very subtle. They may be things we didn't take time to process. They may have been things that were passing through our social media feed, or, a variety of different areas which they can come from. And I think that too, there's a lot of people as world leaders and stuff shift over. They're like, I wanted all this change immediately, right now, and it's like they wanted just everything to be corrected, on day one of things. And that's not physically reasonably possible in things, it's very hard to look at some of that. So again, there's this impatience. There's a lot of people that are wanting this forward movement, forward momentum, and it's not going as fast as they want. And again, we have to come back in and rest into when things are not moving as fast as we want in the way that we want. We have to rest into that divine will, that divine timing, and to let go of trying to force our will. And, we run into this in the spiritual community a lot, where a lot of people were like, well, I'll just make it the way I want it. And I sit back and laugh at that and I go, okay, go right ahead. You just go ahead and focus on that. And yes, there's a certain amount of positive thinking and willing things into action. But of course, once we go down that route, then we're starting to cross various lines of where are we manipulating, where are we not manipulating aspects, and then we're interfering with divine will. And you could cycle down some pretty good paths and all of that. So again, that can even create a conflict within us saying, well, I'm trying to force my will. I'm not getting what I want. And that can create a lot of emotions, not just from the impatience, but then the conflict with divine will. And there being out of that alignment pulls us more into emotional reaction in there. So when we start to look at this, and we think, well, what do we do about this? If these things are happening, we've got the spiritual programming, there's the spiritual disillusionment that's going on. We've got this lack of patience that's going on. Power is not flowing the way that we want it to. We're trying to force our will in here. Well, the first thing that we need to do is we really need to learn about discernment. And this is such a big piece right now. Discernment really can protect us. It can protect us from the false spiritual leaders. And this is something that's going to take practice. And it's going to take being willing to hear from people, look, those people are scammers. It's going to take being willing to hear maybe some things that you don't want to hear along the way with this, because that is discernment. Discernment is learning to tell the truth, not just learning to work from your perception and seeing things the way that you want to see them. There's a lot of people saying that certain things are already in motion in the spiritual community and already at play. And I come back to this aspect. I said, yes and no. They may exist in one aspect, one place, one time, but the physical reality of them is completely different. And so there's we're pulling people into a lot of these illusions in the spiritual movements. And I think that the more you can refine your discernment of things, the less you'll go into these huge emotional states. I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling emotions. And, if you want to learn more of this, you want to look up my video that I did, emotions versus feelings. And we really want to be in those feeling states, but not the emotional states, because the emotional states can, pull us off guard. They can pull us out of line with things and pull us down some pretty bad spirals at times, really in there. So taking a look at that is going to be huge. And then what we want to do, and the real big piece is we need to go really, really deep within ourselves. And when we go really in that, we want to go all the way in to where we do feel peace. So it's kind of like, let's just set everything else aside. Not that it's not happening, but let's just set it aside temporarily. And let's go all the way in. And at what point do I feel peace? When I close my eyes, when I center into my heart region or my gut region or whatever it is for you, different people, different belief systems have different places that they center into. And find your peace. And find where you get that sense of peace until you can feel it. You want to go that deeply in. And then once you start to feel that with that peace, you just want to sit in it. You just want to sit with that sense of peacefulness, just sit in there, because in that moment, in that time while you're tuning into it, you have nothing else that you need to look at or be concerned with. And that is where you're going to connect with your immortal self. That's the infinite self. That's where we can bring the aspects of heaven to earth, so to say, in there. Now, when we connect with the immortal self, what we can do is this allows us to handle any responsibilities and obligations we have. And why is that important? Because when we're handling the responsibilities and obligations that we have, we're not going to get pulled off of track so much in these spiritual programmings and the disillusionment. We're not going to get pulled off track so much with what is happening in different power sources, because we're going to be so connected to that pure divine power that we're not looking at the other stuff. We're not letting the other stuff influence us. So doing and being able to handle the responsibilities from that state of peace, it actually is kind of a grounding sort of aspect, where it's not about grounding into the earth, but it's about grounding into spirit. And a lot of people, we've been taught that responsibilities and obligations are kind of icky and they're heavy and stuff like that, but there's so much spirit in them when we're honoring them. Now obviously we always have to take those checkpoints and go, am I carrying too much? Am I doing too much? Do I need to let go of some? Is there something I want to add? All of these things when it comes to that. But if we can center in that peace and then allow ourselves to start handling the responsibilities, we're going to start to come on track again. And these emotions are going to settle down. Now, the reason that they're going to settle down is because we're handling our needs, our very basic core needs. That's part of what responsibilities are, is, am I providing for food? Am I getting the shelter I need? Am I, the very basic needs in there. And so once our basic needs are being met, then a lot of other stuff, we start to reestablish a connection with safety, with some sense of certainty. I mean, granted, nothing's ever 100% guaranteed, but we start to build that security in. We're getting out of the fear. We're getting out of the emotional roller coaster. As we meet our needs, what we do is we actually then open up the energy patterns for abundance. And when we open up the energy patterns for abundance, we're realizing, look, I'm not deprived. I'm not suffering. I may not have everything I want, but I've got enough for myself. I've got enough to share with other people. And so I really am in this space of abundance. And in that space of abundance, we then again can connect with this inner peace. And the abundance naturally brings that forward, because when we are working from a space of abundance, we are working through divine connection. So that opens up the peace, and then that also allows us to handle our responsibilities. So it's kind of this cycle and the circling that happens in there. And this is really, really a powerful space to be in how it all comes around full circle in a way. And then it becomes a perpetuating motion that remains active. And so when these things are in place, our emotions will naturally come into check. Now, what's happening when we get emotional, if we look at that from a code perspective, emotional actually directly connects with partnerships and relationships. Well, what happens is a lot of times these different things, right? Where's the spiritual programming and disillusionment? It's a broken partnership, is what it is. It's a broken partnership from God or divine source that's going on there. The lack of patience is a broken partnership with ourself, with spirit, with God, with divine source. Okay, so it's indicating the emotional state is really a break in partnership. So that's why we want to bring that back in and reestablish those positive relationships, so to say. And that also is going to help with this, emotional roller coaster, so to say, that people get on this high flooded intensity of emotions that comes through in there. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you, and maybe drop some, again, notes in the chat and the comments area for me. And always, if there's a topic that you want me to look at somewhere along the way, I will make note of it and we can look at it in future videos, see where it's tying into things that are happening in the codes. If you have certain emotional aspects, what are your experiences? Are you finding yourself more emotional lately? Let me know about it. And just drop me a note in the comments in there. And if you like the video, certainly give it a thumbs up, share it out. I can use all the help I can get in there. I know I don't have a huge audience in there, but I feel like I've got some really quality material to share with people. And I know certainly things that have been very valuable with people along the way in there. And again, definitely check out my work. I do different types of coaching work as well. The book is certainly a main thing, and it is The Code Journey, a daily guide for life on Earth. I'm currently writing again 2026. You can find out more information over on my website, and that is compassioncodes.com. Take care, everybody, and I will see you next month.